and talk about the purpose that I think has inspired me to continue on with what Sanford now represents, but it's been a lifelong journey for me. My purpose has been rather mercenary, I hope in a good way, but it hasn't been nebulous and it hasn't been theoretical. The cultures we inherit and develop in our families define our purpose and our related behaviors. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but they're always profound. And for me, the humility and non-negotiable reality of three cultures really kind of define me. The first is an unrelenting and practical reality of physical impairment and handicap. The blind man's cane there is what my father carried around for 30 years of his life. He was running on the court in that basketball powerhouse of Northwood, North Dakota Trojans, and way back in 1949, and his dad, a farmer, noticed that he was missing the ball as the guards would throw it to him when he was running down the sideline. He brought him to the Mayo Clinic and he was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. He was told at that point this would be a long, kind of lonely journey into absolute darkness. That happened over the years from age 18 until he turned 50, and then he died a couple of years ago at age 82. But the last 30 years were in complete blackness. When I was the oldest son, and I would put my elbow out, he would grab it, and I would negotiate with him through the family rooms, the gymnasiums, and everything else, trying to avoid coffee tables so that he would not have the next big gash on his leg, or cupboards in the kitchen to make sure that he didn't open up his forehead. He went on to become a PhD researcher, NASA scientist, and microbiologist, and left obviously a big legacy on his sons. The other one is a wheelchair. My brother Paul fell out of a tree when he was 12 years old. I was the first one on the scene. I was 16. He looked up at me after hitting a branch 40 feet in the air and said, "Kelb, I'm not ever going to walk again." He went on to become an MD, a graduate of the University of Minnesota Medical School, and is now a father and the medical director of a big rehab hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska. But I spent all those months with him in the University of Minnesota where they went into his spine and tried to do what they could back then, but couldn't. And he spent the entirety of his life from age 12 in a wheelchair. These two events really drove me to the notion that I wanted to be in the context and working with the people in medicine. So I went on. The other is that the gravity and responsibility during my college days was to spend all my summers up in Northwood, North Dakota, kind of the epicenter of our family. And the daily commitment to farm life and livestock really shaped a lot of attitude in my life. They needed to be fed because they couldn't feed themselves in the stall, these wonderful horses. They couldn't clean themselves, so I had the pitchfork. And we had to plant every spring or there would be no harvest. Things around here that we all take for granted, but get ingrained in a person's psyche as you go through life. The next thing was my dinner table at home was always surrounded about conversations of current events or what we're going to do with our lives. And my father being the PhD, my mother was a second grade school teacher. Academia and education were very, very significant in our lives. And mostly competitively with two other brothers, if I didn't speak and know something they didn't know, or we couldn't be convincing at the dinner table, we had no credibility. And so this was a real challenge in our family. And it evolved so much that, of course, pursuits in academia became secondhand for us. I went to Concordia College, and my brother David went on to be, he's an NDSU grad, he went on to become a hydrogeochemist, and is, I think right now, ranked #1 in the world on acid rain and those kind of pursuits with the U.S. Geologic Survey. And as I said, Paul's an MD. You're looking at the dumbest of the Krabbenhoft brothers. And, but the good news is, at Concordia, I was given a great award, an Alumni Achievement Award a few years ago. And I said I'd accept it under one condition, knowing that my brothers had achieved so much. I needed a pardon from President Dovry for all sins and omissions that I had done while I was in school. I got the only pardon in the history of Concordia College, so I'm pretty proud of that. As things moved on, I started to believe about this notion of a profound purpose that I've been given a chance to maybe pursue. And I work with my teams, and I work with myself and my family, and I always ask a simple question: without any barriers of money, politics, or anything else, in a perfect world, how could we solve this problem? How could we overcome a challenge? And so I continue to use that all the time. And I'd pursue this, and it would evolve to the point where the people around me became so important. And of course, with 27,000 people, the average size of the family in our organization, our family at Sanford, you're looking at somewhere around 75,000 people. I needed to make a statement about my purpose and what I wanted to surround myself with. And it was going to be people that down here or lower felt an urge to take care of people who were infirm, injured, sick, chronically ill, changing bedpans, doing things everyone else just really wasn't going to mess with it, get their hands dirty doing. And so it's become a culture, just because of an idea, a purpose, a sense that we'd better stand for something a little different. And so we recruit to that culture in our organization. Moving from there would be a dream, an idea, take inventory of the resources and the possibilities, and then listen a little bit to the barriers that might not allow us to overcome those challenges, and then execute, finish. And so my notion was that through a father who was a great writer and a mother who was a great second grade teacher, taught me how to read and think that way, I could speak, I could write, I could communicate with people in a way that they would understand. I modeled my writing after the iconic simplicity of Hemingway's style. And The Death in the Afternoon was something that just stayed with me forever. The premise of a perfect world, remember, has a necessary component in it, and that was the anti-authority, because you're not going to listen to barriers. The sort of justice for the little guy. All of that had to be kept in balance with accomplishing a great personal goal, living with a purpose. And so I had to keep that all in balance or I'd never finish. It was kind of like getting an award at Concordia, and I needed it and I wanted it, but I knew I had to get a pardon before I'd be credible in getting it. So that was the trick. Consistent with my family culture, my career and family started in a small Iowa farming town right on Lock and Dam number 10 in Guttenberg, Iowa. 25 years later and 5 states later, I moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, in the home of this guy, Denny Sanford. I didn't know him, hadn't ever heard of him, lived there for almost 10 years, and I still hadn't met him. But once I did know of him, I knew we weren't ready to have our conversation yet, and I really didn't know what conversation we would have. But I always thought hospitals and doctors should be in the same organization. Most of the world doesn't really pay much attention to it, but there's been a civil war between hospitals and doctors that has been dramatized and enjoyed by both parties for almost, probably a couple centuries. But in a perfect world, remember, that shouldn't be. It meant embracing the precious franchise of what doctors represent in our society and then marrying it to a very stubborn and sometimes bureaucratic, rigid institutional environment. 1,500 physicians later, in the top 10 in the nation, Sanford Health was ready to make a difference. And so I met this guy. There's been a lot of books and articles and stories written about our relationship and the magical moments that have been created between these two guys. The gift, as we call it, was $400 million to start with. I met him on a mountain, his home in Vail, and I told him I wanted to talk about something, and he went, "Oh no." And I said, "Yeah." I laid out the idea of world clinics, that it was time in this country to move from all the study and analysis and further science and move to cures if we found one disease that we really felt was close. I talked to him about other research, and I talked about expanding campuses and what it would mean on the plains to do something with the kind of care we delivered. That became my purpose. And I started to tell him more and more about it. I asked him for $400 million. He asked me, do you know what you're asking? I said, yes, sir, I think I do. And he put his hands to his throat, and he said, well, okay, let's do it. That's exactly how it went down. On top of $400 million, he continues to give and support this purpose, this notion of doing something special. He calls it substance. And my purpose grew. It found a place where all my passions and all my restlessness finally had a platform. The notion that he and I thought of and now has become what we're all about is improving the human condition. This is our purpose. And like I said at the very beginning, it's not nebulous, it's not theoretical. I would not accept the excuses of the imperfect world, you know, filled with barriers and all kinds of loads put on it. I could take care of all of my people, 27,000 of them, and their families, multiply by 3 or 4, by giving increases for 25 years straight, making sure that we imputed scholarships and bonuses and things that would make our people feel like someone at the top really, really cares. And that's what we continue to do today, trying to manage a very difficult landscape in a very complicated world, all with the notion of improving the human condition, inside our family too. I could solve a vexing human tragedy after our discovery process of type 1 diabetes and make researchers embrace the idea of not just furthering the science in pursuit of it, but actually delivering the Sistine Chapel to the Pope. And I was going to be the ugly Pope. Keep demanding it. Keep expecting it. And we do today. And we're close. So, on the story goes, many of you witnessed, watched, and listened to the debates that went on that brought Merit Care and Sanford together. Within a week of that transaction, the notion of improving the human condition, moving a medical center away from the river from an annual flood, getting to high ground, making a dream come true for my predecessors, and we would build, and now you can see the cranes are up and the towers are going up here in Fargo to build the largest medical center in the upper Midwest out of an urban setting. So we're very proud of this purpose, and it continues right in front of us. Luckily, we live in a time when genetics, DNA, stem cells are all part of our daily routine in medicine. We're very aware of it, and we can't wait until the next door opens to find the potential that'll come. Mr. Sanford, last December, sat down once again, presented to him for an hour the notion of marrying internal medicine and genetics together to create Imaginetics, where we could find with just a pinprick and a blood supply the profile of every person in this region, and making medicines more appropriate, making therapies more direct, and finally finding solutions to things that have avoided us and maybe cost so much by being random about it that it would be real, that things were improving. We were improving the human condition in real terms. I could talk now about multinational impacts, just like Fargo is talking today, just like our whole region has the potential to unlock and reach its arms a lot further than we do. The multinational intent of Sanford right now is a prototype right there that represents 10 clinics in Ghana, signed an agreement 14 days ago to build 360 in Ghana and another 100 or more in China. These things are happening as we speak, and we feel we're improving the human condition. So my need to finish would be satisfied, and my purpose has been found in improving the human condition. My resources and allies that surround me now, I'm a lucky man. I've got a lot, and they were pretty much all from around this region of the country, have adopted this purpose so much so that the finish line is in sight. The starting line is fading in the rearview mirror. But the legacy of this purpose won't be in the buildings we create and reach skyward with. It won't even be in the cures, I don't believe, because those will come and then the next one will try to be solved. Right now, I'm completely certain that the legacy of this purpose will be found in the people who come after me and come after the leadership that exists today, because they know that their purpose will even be bigger. And their purpose will be more profound, and they will have one thing of certainty because they watched all of us do what we're doing in our communities right now. They'll be certain that they can finish it. And now I am, and we can go on break. Thank you.